Ferrari celebrating their 75th anniversary with a special livery and race suits at their home race in Monza, along with a flurry of grid penalties this weekend. I'm Nick, and welcome to the Lights Out Formula One podcast. So let's get into it. First of all, sad to say Ryan could not make it today. Hoping to see him back tomorrow for the qualifying review or the race review. But I think we have a very exciting weekend here, starting off with Ferrari. They've had a good showing, top of the times in both FP1 and FP2 so far, but I think everyone is also celebrating in the paddock, in their part of the paddock, I should say, their 75th anniversary. Ferrari has their special livery, and their drivers have a slightly different race suit with a touch of yellow on it, and I think it's fun to see them celebrate. I'm happy to see it, but we'll see if they can transition into results this weekend. Obviously, Ferrari's been having some struggles in the past few races. Finally got on the podium, and they are looking stronger here in Monza now. They're both 1-2 in FP1, and in FP2 they were 1 and 3, with Verstappen splitting them in FP2. He was off the pace in FP1. There were some people saying, maybe he should have been first with Lando Norris got in his way on one of his runs. Oh well, it's practice. We'll see if any of this transitions into the qualifying session tomorrow. Overall, Mercedes is also looking a little bit better, but they've also been saying... it was McLaren that was saying they're not expecting much, even though Lando Norris was P4 and FP2. So we shall have to see how that goes. Moving on, grid penalties this weekend. There is going to be a whole slew of them. Max Verstappen is taking a new internal combustion engine, so his ICE, I believe that is his 5th one. So that is a 5-place grid penalty. Not a too severe one, especially on a track like Monza, where he will be absolutely flying with the Red Bull straight line speed. Perez will also be taking a completely fresh engine. So he will be taking he's passed his allowance of 3 ICEs also, so he'll be taking a 10 grid place penalty, along with his last gearbox, which is the last one within the limits. So we shall see. I'm guessing he will have to take maybe 1 grid penalty later on this season, but he might be able to sneak through on the current gearbox that he has. That will be one to look out for. Continuing down, we have Carlos Sainz. He is taking a brand new Energy Store, MGUK, and gearbox, which is going to cost him 25 grid penalties. I think overall he needs it. I think he can make a charge. We saw him in Spa starting on the front row, and he was having to stay off the curbs a lot. And then last weekend in Zandvoort, he just didn't have pace. So I think Ferrari's been trying to stretch his out, trying to say, okay, let's kind of see if we can wait a little bit on Carlos. We don't want him to have to take more grid penalties as we go. And I think it cost them a little bit, but at the same time, this is not a bad track to take it. Give Sainz a chance to charge through. And it also ends up, coincidentally, obviously I don't think they're intending this, but it opens up the front of the field for Charles Leclerc. So maybe he can get another win in Monza. He's won here before. It would be fun, I think, for the Ferrari fans at Tifosi to see him back on top. So, and then just before free practice 2, Sainz also ended up taking a new control electronics, so he's guaranteed back in the grid penalty. Continuing on, Lewis Hamilton, he will also be taking his 4th power unit of the season, so he is taking, I believe he has a backup grid penalty, so we'll be able to see him charge through the field. We'll have to see how strong the Mercedes is in a straight line speed. They looked all right in Spa. Obviously, they were on the podium, so they have pace. So the question is, can they transfer that? Could Hamilton end up charging up, at least scoring points, I'd like to say? Maybe George Russell on the podium again. That will be one to take a look at. A very interesting point here as we continue down the penalties is Yuki Tsunoda. He is taking a new power unit. However, I don't think that was originally the plan, but he's actually received 5 reprimands So his fifth one came last week in Zandvoort, where he was penalized for driving to the pits with his seatbelts loosened after he stopped on track. So I think that last weekend we saw there was a lot of flurry, there was some controversial statements about it, but overall he did end up stopping on the track. He drove back to the pits. We saw them messing. I think he had started to loosen his belts to get out of the car before the team's like, hey, what are you doing? That's why they had such a long pit stop. They weren't actually messing with anything, but it was fixing his belts, which is quite an interesting thing. You don't usually see something weird like that happen. I think that's why the team didn't say anything. He must have just signaled to them on the pit. I'd have to go back and look. But it's very, very, very interesting. But because of that, that was his fifth reprimand of the season. I'm not exactly sure where the others were, but once you hit 5, he's now been slapped with a 10-place grid penalty. So the team said, okay, we're getting 10 place anyways. May as well take a new power unit. Better take it here in Monza, where we have a chance of fighting their way back up the grid. It's much better to take it here than someplace like Singapore or Japan, where overtaking is going to be a lot trickier. And then lastly, we have Valtteri Bottas. Obviously, we saw him stop on track last week in Zandvoort. Another retirement. He's been having a very, very struggling second 2/3 of the season. Very strong start. And it's been disappointing to see him in Alfa Romeo overall kind of start to struggle a bit more. But he will be taking a 15-place grid penalty as he takes a new ICE turbocharger and MGU-H, all from Ferrari, as normal. So it's going to be very, very interesting. Charles Leclerc, he'll be starting. It's looking like he'll be on pole. Obviously, you can't say anything for certain. I mean, it's basically a shootout between him and George Russell, with both Verstappen, Hamilton, Perez, and Sainz all taking grid penalties. They'll all be launched down the grid, at least varying differences. And then it's going to provide Alpine more. I mean, I shouldn't say that. I don't believe Tsunoda nor Valtteri Bottas will affect too much. It might help the back end of the midfield. Might launch the Aston Martins a little bit higher. Williams up maybe a tiny bit. Haas a little bit. But I think overall, McLaren, Alpine, I think they're going to be resuming their battle. Edge to Alpine this weekend. They've shown some good straight line speed in the past races, especially earlier on. So we'll have to see if they can convert it to high scoring points, which would be honestly a nail in the coffin for McLaren again. The McLaren is currently, I believe, 24 points behind. Yep. McLaren is 24 points behind Alpine. So if Alpine can get a big points haul here and pull that away, it's going to be looking a lot more secure for fourth place with them. Obviously, George Russell is going to be wanting to fight Leclerc, for that pole position. Try and steal some points there in that battle. And I think it's going to be a very good time scene. We're going to have a lot of cars up and down the grid out of order, but it's not going to be a crazy amount out of order. It seems like a lot of these top cars, they're kind of nicely spread out. So Max is going to be starting probably in between 5th and 10th, 5th and 10th, or 11th, depending on where the others go. Obviously, Hamilton and Sainz will be at the back, so they'll be charging. That'll be a good fight between those two, how they pick their way around. And then Perez, was it a 10-place grid penalty for him? Yep, so a 10-place grid penalty. So he'll probably be starting just ahead of the Ferrari and Mercedes of Hamilton and Sainz. My guess would be probably about 16th, 15th, somewhere around there, depending on how his qualifying goes. And maybe higher if Sainz and Hamilton don't partake in much qualifying. That will help him out, because let me think here, that could put him as high as 14th. So there'll be good charges there. A team I'm very excited to look at this weekend is Williams. Alex Albon in particular had a very good weekend in Spa with their straight line speed, and he was remarking earlier on before the weekend of Zandvoort how he was looking forward to Monza. There's, I think, good anticipation in the air around the Williams garage. They've got a good car with straight line speed. Obviously, their cornering is not the greatest. Excuse me. But overall, it showed they were very hard to pass, and they were somewhat competitive in Spa. They scored points. So with some grid penalties, that could launch them up a couple places, strong qualifying. Williams could be looking at some points. They were able to hold up the McLarens and the Aston Martins. Aston Martin's been making a charge. It'll be good to see them, see what they can do. Going back to the front runners, we're going to have Max Verstappen P5. I don't think it's going to take too much for him to cut through the couple in front of him. Most likely Alpine, McLaren up there, unless we get a surprise driver that makes it up into the high place of the top 10. You never know. It's Monza. Get a good slipstream, and maybe we could see a Williams Q3 or some other team up there other than the regular top 5 teams, which is going to make it interesting. Overall, I think we're going to see a three-way battle pretty early on between Max, George Russell, and Charles Leclerc. I think the tifosi, Ferrari, everyone in general would like to see Ferrari not make any mistakes this weekend and get a clean weekend of racing. Hopefully that can happen and we can get a good battle on track. It seems like Red Bull's going to have an advantage just because they've had such good straight line speed in the past. So we will have to see how that rolls out. The Mercedes, Ferrari, that's going to be tight. I'm not really sure how that's going to work. I think it's going to be edge Ferrari for now. But we'll have to see FP1, FP2. I mean, Ferrari stayed up top. Mercedes kind of slipped down in FP2. But again, it's only practice. We don't know for sure. This weekend is going to be interesting for them. Both those teams are in need of points. And then as we work down the midfield, once again, I think we're going to see good racing up and down the field. Haas is probably going to have a tough weekend. McLaren's going to have a tough weekend. I'd say edge to Alpine, Williams. Aston Martin didn't look bad, too bad in Spa. AlphaTauri didn't look terrible. Maybe Pierre Gasly can sneak up into the points. Obviously, Tsunoda's going to be starting towards the back end of the grid. So that's going to be tough for him to charge up. But we could always see safety cars or some sort of incident that throws a little wrench in the mix or in the plans for somebody. Overall, I will say my predictions for this race, I think it's going to be a good early on in the race. I think the race could calm down a little bit as we go. I would be surprised if we see a shocking winner like we did last year. Here, it's really looking like Verstappen's going to just cruise away. He's been driving on another level. His car is looking phenomenal. And if he can pull a win out here, he's going to be one step closer to that 13-win record that Sebastian Vettel and Michael Schumacher hold. Will he get that this year? We'll have to see. I believe he needs 4 more wins with 7 races to go. So obviously Singapore I don't think will be the greatest for Red Bull. So there's one, but all the others, there's a lot of tracks left that are going to be able to capitalize on straight line speed. And another thing is, the interesting part is there's a lot of teams taking more and more grid penalties. And I'm almost wondering if the parts this year are not, they're not as reliable as the past, which I find to be very interesting because so many drivers have taken penalties. I mean, we have Yuki Tsunoda and Bottas are on their 6th and 7th, like trash control and ICE. Excuse me. Other drivers, I think the lowest drivers are on 3. So it's kind of surprising to see all these different drivers taking so many grid penalties. We've seen so many parts be off that you're taking 1 grid penalty this weekend, 1 grid penalty this weekend. So it's been, I think, keeping the racing interesting as the top 3 teams. It's kind of getting a little more predictable as the season goes on. Max pulls away. You get a good battle between Ferrari, Perez, and the Mercedes. But I think with these grid penalties, it's making things interesting. In my opinion, we have a wonderful battle in the midfields this year. It's a very tight race still. Lot of money to be moved around between the teams. Excuse me, I'm sorry about that. So it'll be interesting. Again, there's only 9 points between Haas and Aston Martin, 7th through 9th, and then about 18 points, 17 points between Haas and Alfa Romeo. We've got 24-point difference for 4th place between Alpine and McLaren, and then 30-point difference between Ferrari and Mercedes. So there is a lot of positions that are up for grabs this year. We're seeing a lot of points, a lot of shifts, very, very different results depending on tracks, which is great to see. And overall, I think it's going to be a good weekend. I think everyone seems to enjoy this track. So hopefully we don't have any issues. F2 is also running again this weekend. Felipe Drogovic, he's pulling away. The silly season driver market, we still have quite a bit left to do there. Seats are still up for grabs. Oh. Sorry about this. Unintentional. But we also have Colton Herta from IndyCar may be coming over to AlphaTauri. We are waiting on the FIA decision on this. Obviously, we don't know if they're going to grant him his super license points that he is short a couple of. If he does, AlphaTauri would sign him. Pierre Gasly would then most likely, that would pull the trigger on him going to Alpine. So we'll have to wait and see if Alpine is wanting to wait a little bit longer or if they want to lock up that seat with someone like Mick Schumacher. Danny Ricciardo's job is also up in the air. He may be signing with Mercedes. There was some audio that came out from him and Perez where he was thinking of taking a year off. That'll be interesting. It'll be very difficult, I think, for him to get back if he does that. There's also some interesting things at Haas about Nico Hülkenberg joining them, which I think would be very, very interesting. I think if Nico Hülkenberg were to join Haas, that would be kind of a little bit silly, kind of fun to see, because obviously Hülkenberg and Kevin Magnussen have not gotten along very well in the past. There's been a lot of drama between them, especially when Renault and Haas were battling for 4th a few years back. So we'll have to see if he gets pulled up. Antonio Giovinazzi, again, tested for him for Haas this weekend. Maybe Ferrari will want him back in Formula One. So we still have quite a bit left to go there. Let's do quickly, looking forward to qualifying. I think we're going to see Charles Leclerc on pole position, and then George Russell behind him, and then I'm going to say Fernando Alonso P3 for qualifying. Obviously, that's taken into account all the grid penalties. So Max may be up in the mix for qualifying itself. But we will have to see. And that's all we have time for today. We're going to keep this one short. I'm hoping Ryan should be good to go for the next podcast coming in tomorrow or Sunday. Wait and see what our scheduling is. Sorry we haven't been able to get a good consistent schedule. Still working out the kinks of the podcast, but I want to thank everyone for watching and supporting us as we go. We've actually really been enjoying doing this, and we're hoping to continue doing it. So make sure you guys leave feedback. If you're watching this on YouTube, we also have it on Spotify and Anchor. Thank you, everyone, for listening. I hope you enjoy the weekend of Monza, and we will talk to you guys soon.